This is my 2018 Honda CRF250L. And this is me dropping it again and again and again. With each crash and each repair, this bike has become sturdier and sturdier though, up to a point where I'd now call it bulletproof. So in this video I'll show you all the modifications I've done and tell you why a skid plate alone is not enough. All the modifications in this video are meant to save your ass on the trail. They won't protect you from every type of damage out there, but they should be able to get you home. Most of the time anyway. They're all based on my own experiences, so behind every modification there's a crash that has led to some kind of damage. So just to start with some quick info on the bike, this is my first motorcycle ever, and when I bought it I was a complete newbie rider. I bought it with 12k on the clock. It was completely stock and in mint condition. I don't think the previous owner ever really took it off-road, which is kind of sad because these bikes love to play in the dirt. I bought this bike with the sole intent to go off-roading though, so that's what I did from day one. I think probably 80 to 85% of all my riding is off-road, and the rest is just, tarmac to and from the trails. I started out on the Trans-Europe trail, which in the Netherlands mainly consists of dirt roads and gravel roads and stuff like that. And while I had some clumsy moments, I never really did any damage there. So I think if that's all you're going to be riding, you can probably get away without any of these modifications. But I wanted to ride more technical trails, and as soon as I progressed into trail riding, the crashes and damages and repairs quickly began to add up. I'll go through the modifications in no particular order. One is not more important than the other. I think if you're serious about off-roading, you should probably do them all, but it's up to you of course. But I'll start with just my first damage ever, which was the radiator. This happened on my first day of hill climbs. We did some small hill climbs a day and that all went well. And I got a bit overly confident and looked at a bit bigger hill climb. It had like a turn in it and like a four-wheel track with a bit of a berm in the middle. It didn't look super difficult, but it just didn't go the way I wanted. Oh, kut. Ding is helemaal ingeduikt. So this crash completely banged up my radiator. This thing is supposed to be straight, but as you can see, it's more twisted than a curly fry. And if you look closely, you can also see that it's like kind of ripped here. Now, while this thing is pretty banged up, I was lucky that the crash didn't cause any leaking, so I was still able to ride home with it. But if it does cause a leak, you're pretty much screwed and stranded trailside, so I would definitely recommend to get a radiator guard. A popular choice is the Flatland Racing radiator guard, but it is hard to find here in Europe, so I went with this Xidemer guard from Amazon instead. Installation was super easy and so far it has worked well for me. Okay, so this next modification might be a bit of an obvious one, but if you're going to ride off-road, you really need hand guards. When I bought this bike, it didn't have any, so I actually started riding without them, and as a result, I pretty quickly snapped my front brake lever. Now I was lucky again, because I was able to ride on with it like this, but if it would have snapped any lower, I wouldn't have, and I would have been severely screwed. So I went with the Acerbis ones because they're super affordable and also think they look quite nice, although at the moment you might notice a small difference between the left and the right side. And that is because I took a huge spill on this one while riding the Trans-Europe trail in Slovenia. Holy shit, that was pretty uncontrolled. Alright. Ah! So this is super slick. Oh, whoa! Ay, ay, ay. Ah. Alright. So this guard really absorbed all the impact. It's completely bent out of shape and this thing just kind of came off. So I will have to replace it. But although that kind of sucks, it did do its job because the front brake lever is still intact and I was able to ride on that day. Okay, so while we're up here, let's also quickly talk about these mirrors. I changed the stock mirrors for these double take enduro mirrors. And these double take mirrors are super popular, especially the Adventure version. Now the idea behind it is quite nice. They are foldable, so you can move them out of the way. And if you hit a branch or you drop your bike, they can fold out of the way and you don't break anything. Now, while in theory that's super nice, in reality I find them super annoying. That mirror is driving me crazy. Oh man, this mirror is fucking me up. Fucking mirrors. I'm still not super happy with those mirrors. Especially this left one, when I'm riding on the trails, every little bump it comes down and it hits my hand. And then when I'm standing, it's like super in the way. It's annoying. When it hits a branch, it starts twisting, even though I put a ton of Loctite in there. That alone is just frustrating enough for me to look for an alternative. But another thing I don't really like is if you like voluntarily fold them out of the way like this to go trail riding and you want to fold them back, they're never really immediately in the right position. So you really have to like kind of twist and search, and then they come loose and you're like fumbling around. Well, I just want to like ride, move them out of the way, keep riding, move them back. You know, I don't want to stop and adjust them and everything, because then it really kind of messes up the flow. So I know a lot of people love them, but I actually wouldn't recommend them. Sorry, double take. A friend of mine has like little foldable mirrors, which you can't adjust angle-wise, but you can just fold them in and out. And I'm also looking into just bar-mounted mirrors. Not sure if it would all fit nicely in here, but something I might try. Okay, so let's move on to the bottom of the bike. And this is where I did things a bit differently than most people, by also adding a crash bar. Now I really think this makes a big difference, and let me show you why. Everybody will tell you to install an aluminum skid plate, because the stock plastic skid plate doesn't really offer any protection at all. So that's definitely a pretty big difference. I mean, this is just like a flingy like kind of like plastic, while this is solid aluminum. So to start with, I did just that. I only installed this skid plate, I didn't have the crash bar yet, and I still had the stock gear shifter. But from my experience, this doesn't offer that much protection either. So I discovered this while I was trail riding with a few buddies. There was a section where we were riding in a kind of like an abandoned water drainage, and it had this short climb in it, and it was filled with leaves and super slippery. So I messed up like halfway, and I crashed the bike into the concrete side of the water drainage. So what that did, it completely bent the gear shifter, and it kind of slammed it into the engine block here. Yeah. I went looking for something to protect this area more, and I found this SW Motec crash bar. It only cost me like 40 bucks. It's super easy to install. I did it to trim like the skid plate a little, but what this does is it just offers quite a bit of space between the crash bar and the gear shifter, and also the engine block and the skid plate. Of course, it's not foolproof. If you have a rock which just is this big and still hits there, you still have the same problem. But I really do think that for the money, this is probably one of the best modifications you can do. I also replaced the stock gear shifter with this Zeta one. This is made from aluminum, and it really just, I don't know if you can see clearly, but it's pretty bent. And yeah, it's just super soft, and I wanted something a bit more robust. So this one is made from cast iron. It just feels a lot more solid. I already had a few impacts on it, but so far it did really well, and yeah, I just feel like it's a lot sturdier than the old one. Okay, so while we're in that area anyway, I also changed the foot pegs. I actually don't dislike the stock foot pegs that much, but these ones are just a little bit wider and just give you a bit more sure footing, I guess. It doesn't really do anything in terms of protection because they fold away, but you know, if you stand better on the bike, I guess that is also a form of protection. So if you don't mind spending 50 or 60 bucks, I think it's a nice little addition. Okay, so this might sound kind of crazy, but my personal favorite modification is this luggage rack. I don't primarily use it to carry luggage, although that's a nice bonus, of course. But this thing has made my life so much easier in picking the bike up again. Come on, boy! Honestly, if you don't have a rack like this installed, you should. It makes picking up the bike so much easier. You see, before I always had to grab the frame, and it's always been kind of awkward, and I could never really get a good grip. So I looked for something with like handles or a better grip or whatever, and then I found this rack, which has these two huge side handles. They're super sturdy, and I didn't think it could make a huge difference, but it really does. Maybe it's because you have like better leverage, or I don't know what it is, but I'm in love with this thing. So I also hope that like these handles, because they stick out a little, they will offer some protection for these rear blinkers, because these things are super vulnerable. And especially on the right side, if it gets knocked down, it gets in front of the exhaust and it just gets completely melted away. So what I recommend you do is that after every crash or drop, just quickly check on this right rear blinker to see if it's still in the right position. It will only take a few seconds and you can really save yourself a massive headache. Okay, so lastly, there are two more things I've done to the bike so far, although those are not really protection mods. I installed a tail tidy just because it looks cool. And I changed the rear sprocket from a 40 tooth to a 43 tooth. So I'm running a 14-43 setup. And what that does is it brings a peak torque a bit lower in the rev range and just makes the bike handle a bit nicer on the trails, I think. So I actually had quite a few crashes in my last few rides, including my biggest one to date. Fuck. But since installing all of these mods, I've always been able to ride on and never really had any damage except for the handguard. So I feel pretty confident to say that this bike is now nuke proof. Having said that, am I completely finished? No. I have one major gripe with this bike, and that has to do with this area right here. I don't want to give away too much, but I found something really cool for it. And if you're interested in something like that, then make sure to hit the subscribe button because it's going to be really awesome. But first I'm going to wrap up this video because, a funny side note, I thought it was going to take me like 2 or 3 hours to film, but it's been 9 hours and it's past midnight here, so kind of looking forward to my bed. I even just noticed that my lights already went out. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something from it. If you did, then please hit the like button. It really helps out a lot. But for now, thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next video. Ciao.